This lens is one of the best lenses I have ever used. It's definitely one of the most versatile, if not the most versatile that I've ever owned. It's got a good focal length to allow for a range of subjects, a wide enough aperture to let a lot of light in and get that smooth bokeh, and it's a reasonable price. And those are a few of the reasons as to why I chose this lens over any other when I was in the market for my XT4. And if you're wondering what lens I'm talking about, it's the one that you're watching this video through right now, which is the Fujifilm XF23mm f2 RWR. It's the only lens that I own for my XT4, and to be honest, I don't think there is another lens that I would have needed or wanted when shooting with this XT4 over the past 5 or 6 months. I've used this lens to create a truckload of photos and a decent amount of videos for my YouTube channel. And now that I've owned this lens for a few months and I've got a good amount of experience with it, I thought it was the right time to create a video where I share my thoughts about this lens, and spoiler alert, I love it. So in this video, I will bring up 5 pros with this lens, and then only 1 con since it's the only problem that I encountered while using this lens. I could sum up these pros just by saying that this lens is extremely versatile, hence the title of the video. But these 5 pros will tell you why it's so versatile, so be sure to stick around. But without further ado, let's just get into the video. And the first pro is definitely the focal length. This lens has a focal length of 23mm, which may seem quite wide. But due to this lens being designed for the Fujifilm X series of cameras, which are crop sensor cameras, this lens actually has an equivalent focal length of 35mm, or 35.2mm if you want to be really precise. And the 35mm focal length is an extremely versatile focal length, and personally for me, I think it is the most versatile. It's wide enough to capture some great landscapes, street photos, and just get a lot in the frame. But it's also narrow enough to produce some lovely portraits and product shots. Another bonus about this focal length is although it is quite wide, there is absolutely no distortion, which is very beneficial for portraits. And speaking of portraits, my favourite thing to photograph with this lens is documentary portraits of my family, friends, and just everyday things. It's wide enough so I can get close and capture a lot in the scene, but I can also focus on one person or one thing and get close and get that separation with them and the background. Like I mentioned, it's a super versatile lens, and I just think this is the main reason as to why. Right, now we're going to move on to the second pro, and that pro is the aperture. Being at f2, this lens lets in a good amount of light, allowing you to put that ISO down or bump up that shutter speed if need be. This also allows you to get a good amount of separation with your subject and background when shooting portraits. And you might be saying that f2 isn't exactly very shallow on a crop sensor camera, and you are right, but it's also the equivalent of an f3 on a full frame camera, and if you have shot with an f3 on a full frame camera, you would know that that is good enough. Another good thing about this lens and its aperture is even if you are shooting wide open at f2, your image will still be perfectly sharp. And wide open sharpness is an issue that I've experienced a lot with a bunch of different lenses. But I can tell you for certain that this is one of the sharpest lenses that I have used when I'm shooting wide open. The third pro is the price of this lens. Brand new, you can get it for just under £400, which may seem like quite a lot, but honestly I can say that it is worth it. But where the price of this lens really shines is the second-hand market. I got mine in like new condition from MPB for just over £200, which is just crazy because I'm pretty sure it was never used as it was still sealed. And I think the perks that this lens brings along with the price tag makes a compelling argument to purchase it. The penultimate pro is the size and weight of this lens. Thanks to the X series of cameras being crop sensor and this 23mm being a prime lens, it means that the lens is super small. It's by no means a pancake lens, but it's definitely one of the smallest and lightest that I've used. And being a small and light lens means that it complements the X series of cameras very well, especially my XT4, which it just looks amazing on. This lens is a very similar size and weight to the 35mm f2, and I use that lens all the time on my Fujifilm X-Pro3, and even on a body as small as that, it still felt right at home. So I can't imagine that this 23 f2 wouldn't feel very out of place on the X Pro series or even the XE series. And the final pro is something that I can imagine not everyone will take advantage of, but I think for the most part it's a universally liked feature. And that feature is the weather resistance of this lens, which is essential for me as I live in the UK. Being in the UK means that it's raining for the most part of the year, but it gets even worse for me as I live in Cornwall, which has its own like microclimate, and the weather is extremely unpredictable. So even though the sky could be completely blue without a cloud in sight, in just a few minutes it can go to pouring rain. And that's why weather resistance on a lens is absolutely vital for me. I can't go outside with a lens that isn't weather sealed just for the heavens to open up and rain to get in all of my gear and potentially break it. Weather resistance is an even more vital part of my gear when it comes to video, as I could be using a camera that has no electronic parts and is completely fine getting wet. But I need to record myself using that camera, which means putting this camera here on a tripod for an extended period of time so it can capture enough video as possible. And I wouldn't be able to do that without the weather resistance of this lens. It truly is a game changer for me. That was the final pro, and to be honest, I could probably talk about a few more things, but I don't want this video to be too long. So that's why we're going to get into the only con about this lens that I can think of and then end the video. And that is that this lens does suffer from a tiny bit of chromatic aberration. And sometimes the out of focus areas can appear different colours from the top and the bottom. I'm not sure if that is chromatic aberration or like colour fringing or whatever that is, but it's not, you know, purple stuff being over contrasty areas, it's the top being green and the bottom being purple or vice versa, and it's very strange. But anyway, this lens does suffer from chromatic aberration, especially when the scene is contrasty. I don't think I even have any images of this to show you, but it happens quite a lot with trees. And then like I mentioned, this lens has weird color cast on the top and the bottom of the image in out of focus areas, especially when you are like recording or photographing things close up. I haven't explained that very well, and I will try and get some photos or videos to show you what I mean, but if there are no photos or videos, that means I just couldn't do it. I couldn't make this lens bad. Anyway, that's the end of this video. I've really enjoyed making this one. It just feels like an old school pros and cons video that I used to do like a couple years ago. I've just stopped doing those recently, but I'd like to do more of them as they are really fun to make. But if you have enjoyed, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.